Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I want to plant my flag as the first review on YouTube that I've seen of this book because it's kind of fresh and hardly anybody's talking about it, and I can't believe it because it's a part of one of the biggest kids' horror franchises ever, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I saw this a while ago on Thrift Books when I was looking through the book series from the classic 90s run that ran like 23 books, and I was looking for some deals, and I saw that there's a pre-order for this, so I filed it in the back of my brain. And I think a month or two ago, I found it at Books A Million, and it's called "Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of the Gravemother." This book is written by Rin Chupeco, and this book is going to be, I think, one of 5 currently planned standalone books that different authors will contribute to that will act like Are You Afraid of the Dark stories. Now, going into this, only ever reading one Are You Afraid of the Dark book before this, I knew that this was going to be a different type of story because look how thick this book is. This is a 250-page story with the intro and outro being Midnight Society stuff, and then the remaining elements in the middle being the main story, right? So I knew this was going to be a lengthy book, and it did take me a few days to finish. But I'm glad I picked this one to kind of review on the channel as my first Are You Afraid of the Dark book, because I'm honestly shocked by how creepy this book was. As a fan of Goosebumps, and as somebody who likes to read all the books, including modern Goosebumps, even though I grew up on the classic 90s run, the original 62 and Series 2000 mostly, I try to give the modern books a fair shake. And recently I've been kind of bummed out by how tame modern Goosebumps has been. And then I find something like this that I think is genuinely creepy. It's definitely methodical. There's something about Rin Chupeco's writing here that is trying to build a more adult-feeling mystery with layers and thematic subtext to pull from. I mean, this is a far cry from the content Goosebumps is putting out, and I think it's a breath of fresh air, especially if you're a fan of the 90s and you're fans of both Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark. You need to go check this out. Now, I will say this. If you've never heard of this book, I don't blame you, because the marketing for this book has been next to nothing. As a matter of fact, when I discovered this and I announced it on social media, nobody had heard of this even being a thing. So I can tell you now, the marketing on this book series isn't getting much justice, and apparently they have been hard to find in bookstores. And this book has been out for a while now. I've only been able to find it in Books A Million and not Barnes & Noble. So if you're out looking and you have a Books A Million nearby you, I would go check there first if you can. But I would definitely recommend this book if you can get your hands on it. I think you can find copies online pretty easily. This was such a refreshing story for kids' horror these days. I mean, if there's any testament to an idea that Are You Afraid of the Dark can make a bounce back on like Paramount Plus with like a 8 to 10 episode anthology run or something, this is that. This could be like an hour-long special. There's a lot of stuff to peel back with this story, like I said. And for this plot overview, I'm going to, for the first time on this channel, because of this book's length, I'm actually just going to hop around stuff that happens in the story instead of telling you the complete plot synopsis, if only because this book is 250 pages. There's so many stops and pauses to let the story breathe throughout this book that I feel like the plot synopsis will go on for like 40 minutes if I did it that way. So I'm just going to give you the general rundown of what you can expect with this, okay? So I'm not going to give too much away, I feel, doing this, but it's also because for the life of me, I don't think I could pinpoint exactly every plot point to a T justice, okay? So, the story starts off with a new kid, and this new kid, I think his name is Levi, he has come into a school, he's like a basketball player, and he has this rivalry almost immediately once he gets into school with this other boy, and this other boy likes to haze him, and, he tries to, make the best light of it, but he knows that he's kind of being ousted by every other player because all the other players are friends with this guy. And you kind of feel bad for him. And then at lunch, he meets a group of kids that all seem to be friends with this kid named Brian. And Levi, I think his name is Brian, by the way. I could be mistaken, but I want to say that's his name. The kid that's bullying Levi. He says that he's into horror and he's, into sports. And, the kids are like, hey, why don't you come hang out with us, later on? And we get together and tell some scary stories. And we'll see if you're good and you can join our club. And he's like, all right. And then he ends up going to meet them. And it ends up being a Midnight Society. Now, if you're not familiar with Are You Afraid of the Dark, the Midnight Society is the group of kids that gather around a campfire. And each I guess, episode from the original show, they go around and take turns telling their own tales. And some characters in the Midnight Society would have reoccurring villains or, characters in their stories. Some of them will go for more goofy, over-the-top stuff. You get what I'm saying? It's just a crapshoot of what you can expect. So when Levi gets there, he decides to go ahead and share his story that he has brought that he thinks will scare them and grant him initiation. And the story is called The Tale of the Gravemother. So all you really need to know about this main story here is that this kid named Zane, his father, and his sister Emma have moved to this new town called Solitude, Pennsylvania, that has a history with a haunted mansion called the Stilgarth Manor. And the Stilgarth Manor, they didn't know this previously because for the past 5 years at this point of the story, after Emma and Zane lost their mom, their father has been moving them all across the country. And they haven't had a permanent place to live. And they had somebody named Mr. Vink. And I think it's supposed to be a nod to Dr. Vink, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what some people I've chatted to about this book seem to think. He's reached out to the family and has invited them to Solitude because the mayor of Solitude wants to speak with the father because they found a deed while the mayor was trying to tear down the manor that says that they can't really tear it down because there's an inheritor of the house. So Zane has now arrived in this town. They've shacked up in an apartment complex in the town, and he goes to school to try out for this basketball team, kind of similarly to how Levi met the Midnight Society in the beginning. He meets this kid named Garrett, and this kid named Garrett seems to be just lighting him up, kind of hazing him. And Zane doesn't know what to think of it. He's kind of upset with Garrett. And this kind of comes to fruition when Garrett, corners Zane and his new group of friends that he ends up making. Garrett's like, well, we heard that your family got the Stilgarth Manor. And that place is very haunted. And Zane's like, okay, well, there's such a thing as ghosts. And Zane kind of harps on this throughout the story, right? It all comes to a point. They have this rivalry, right? And all the kids show up on the day where Zane, his father, and his sister are going to go to Stilgarth Manor, meet with Mr. Vink, and discuss what to do with the mayor. And on that day, let's just say they're touring the house, and there has been some damage from previous attempts of demolishing the house. And the dad seems to think that it's the wrong idea to go ahead and selling the house over to the mayor, because the mayor really wants to tear it down. And he himself has been buying up some properties around this small town, taking people out of business. And what he's trying to do is tear it all down and put big box retailers like Costco and Walmart and whatever in the town to run out local business, because he thinks that having these type of stores will drive more population to the town, and the big box retailers will bring more jobs. So that's a necessary evil that the mayor believes in. So the family thinks that it's not the best idea, but there was some miscommunication after something happens in the manor where Zane seems to think that he sees this woman. Now, I haven't brought this up, but this woman is called the Gravemother. And this Gravemother is this woman that goes back hundreds of years, back to the 1700s, near the founding of Solitude itself. And it's, local legend that there was 3 kids that mysteriously disappeared under her watch. And it's said that she, like, haunts people throughout the years. Anytime people come up to Stillgarth Manor, this decrepit woman with, like, a missing jaw and creepy, like, bony features will just, like, haunt you. And Zane thinks he sees her. But there's a scene that happens where they're all outside. You got cameras everywhere trying to get to the dad for, having Stillgarth Manor and all that. And something happens where there's like this, I guess, monument, and they try to move it. And once they move the monument, Zane thinks that Garrett has seen what he saw, because he saw this creature coming out from underneath the monument, and he thinks that that is the Gravemother. And Garrett has seen the same thing. And he gets confirmation of that later on when he's in class shortly after, and he shares a class with Garrett. And Garrett decides to pair up with Zane because he thinks that since they both saw the Gravemother, they can team up and solve this mystery. Now, from this point on, the story gets very weird. I'm going to be very vague with this. I'm just going to kind of skim through this for time, okay? So, Zane and Garrett start to get very close throughout this experience. Zane starts to go over to Garrett's family's house, who, they're called the Sevillas. They run the local town morgue, or not morgue. I'm saying that wrong. Funeral parlor. That's the right term. Well, they run the local town funeral parlor, and Zane gets an idea of why Garrett is the way he is, and starts to kind of respect Garrett a little bit. Zane gets close with Garrett's family, and later on, so does his younger sister, once Zane's father gets in an accident involving Stillgarth Manor. But once Zane and Garrett start hanging out, Zane and Garrett both start getting visited by weird visions of this Gravemother. And they're absolutely terrifying when you read these. And over the time, they start to get this message coming through from the Gravemother saying Emmy. And both the boys seem to think that it's referring to Emma. And throughout the story, Zane and Garrett try to recruit some help. Garrett has like a ghost busting team that I guess are kind of like ghost hunters, but teenagers. And they try to, themselves go to speak with the Gravemother at Stillgarth Manor, and something becomes of that. Zane kind of speaks with some locals and gets some confirmation that, he's found really a real home in Solitude, and his family is pretty much like the decision of the future of the town, because if Stillgarth Manor gets sold to the mayor, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that all the local businesses that give the town charm are going to fall. And he thinks that it's important that him and his family somehow keep Stillgarth Manor, maybe turn it into a museum or something, and that plays a role in the story as well. And you get some commentary about small businesses and large businesses, and the ethics in that. So I really appreciated that part of the story. But it all kind of ties together because, like I said, it comes to a point, they keep seeing all these crazy visions of this ghost woman, the Gravemother. Like, Zane will be riding his bike, and all of a sudden the Gravemother starts floating across the road in front of him. There's some crazy, creepy visuals. The Gravemother has some powers to kind of transport them to the past, into like a weird like vision dimension where they can see certain rooms of the Stillgarth Manor in like the past. And there's little breadcrumbs of this mystery constantly going on. Well, the father, I keep getting sidetracked, was involved trying to remove back the monument at Stillgarth Manor, and it's found that there's bones inside of it, and it turns out that these bones might belong to some of these kids of the fabled legend behind the Gravemother. And once these bones are found, the sightings keep escalating. Now more and more people across the town are seeing visions of this lady. There's accidents going on. You know, Zane's dad is in the hospital, so him and his sister Emma have to go stay with Garrett's family and all that. And it comes to a point where Garrett has decided to recruit some help of a famous ghost busting team that actually filmed at the Stilgarth Manor one time. He apparently was like good friends with them, and he's invited them to come over and, you know, speak with the Gravemother because they think that they're close to figuring out the mystery, because they keep thinking that it wants something to do with Emma, and if they can find out why, maybe they could put a stop to all this and help the Gravemother move on. Well, let's just say, because of time and because of lack of spoilers, because this is very easy to spoil where the story's going to go, there's a big twist involving the third kid that wasn't really discovered inside of the statue with the other two bodies of bones. And let's just say you learn of who this Emmy person is that the Gravemother is chanting. You get to learn if it has anything to do with Zane's sister. And you get some pretty neat wrapped up endings involving the mystery about, you know, why the Gravemother was doing this the whole time. You get more solid answers to all that, and I don't want to go any further because I'll start to really spoil it for you. And you get kind of an open-ended ending involving, you know, what happened to the Gravemother, and you'll see what I'm saying when you read this book. And you get kind of like a copacetic ending involving the main story. And then the whole book wraps up with Levi, the narrator, you know, kind of summarizing what happens to Stilgarth Manor moving forward. And Levi ends up getting, you know, inducted into the Midnight Society, and story kind of leaves off and potentially might go into the second book. So that is pretty much what you're going to expect out of the Tale of the Gravemother. Now, first and foremost, I know that plot synopsis kind of sounded all over the place, but there's just so much stop and go in this book that you have to realize that, like I said, it's just impossible to go from exact point to exact point without making this video insanely long. So go try this at your own leisure to get all those exact points, but I just give you a general gist of what to expect, okay? So let's start off with some positives with this book. One thing I really loved about this book, and I don't know if it has something to do with Ren Chupeco's writing or anything, but the whole book is written in third person. And in the epilogue and in the, you know, prologue dealing with the Midnight Society, that's actually in like present tense with Levi's character. And even in that third person, there's just something about it that Chupeco's able to bring alive a lot of these other characters, and you start to get really invested and understand their personalities by just how much time Chupeco spent, especially on the two characters of Zane and Garrett. And I think Zane and Garrett being polar opposites, or I guess enemies in the beginning, and coming together over a common cause, trying to figure out what's going on with the Gravemother, was a nice touch. And, you know, while it's kind of predictable and cliche to assume that they're going to end up becoming best friends in the story, you do see that conflict throughout this that I just barely even touched the surface of, where Zane does feel kind of hurt by what Garrett did early on to him, but they've kind of put it aside because they think it will serve the town better justice, because they think that they're on a limited time frame before Zane's dad makes a decision whether to keep the house and stay in solitude or to sell it to the mayor, and they just move off and keep being, you know, nomads. And I think you really will find yourself, if you read this book, understanding Zane as a character. You know, he's lost his mom a few years ago prior to this story. He really wants a place to call home. He, you know, you get the sense that he comes from these big city areas like New York City, and he doesn't really have much opportunity to see a small town. But once he gets into that small town life, he starts to appreciate it more. He starts to realize that this is like a home. And you get the sense that he has the weight of the world on his shoulders when he realizes that he and his family are pretty much keeping the town the way it is by not selling the manor over to the mayor. And in a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of Casper: A Spirited Beginning, but like the good kind, because Zane is definitely characterized way more than the character from that movie, but there is a lot of similarities with the idea. And if you've seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. Like a mansion is holding a town's character together. It's the same thing here. And I do think that Garrett himself, Garrett has to go through some, humbling moments. He has to, come to a point to apologize to Zane. And him sharing this experience with him, I think also makes him more likable. Because at first he's not all that likable, but like I said, Chupeco's able to characterize these boys, and you start to really care about Garrett. And you see that his intentions are in the right place. And what these boys are doing are, for the greater good of themselves. And at some point, it kind of shifts from helping the town to helping solve this mystery so the Gravemother can be at rest. So there's a lot of selflessness going on with these two characters, and I think it's very noble. So that's a good positive. I think the Stillgarth Manor location in the town of Solitude was really well done. I had imagined, like well, I haven't been to many places in Pennsylvania, but I imagine like a small town with all these different buildings that the book describes, and seeing this old manor overlooking the rest of the town. It had this atmosphere. It's kind of hard to explain, but it felt whole. It felt, very eerie. Something was off, especially when Chupeco spent a lot of focus on the manor itself. This house seemed very rickety, very creepy, lots of rooms with just old things hanging around, kind of lost to time because this house has been in disarray for centuries almost. And you get a sense that, it has a lot of history to it. And it's just something eerie about it. There's like a local legend that also feeds into it. It's just so atmospheric. It's hard to explain unless you read the book. It's synergy in motion, to put it best. And that kind of goes into the overall idea and the overall structure of the story. I do like that Chupeco laid out a mystery. This is a bona fide 250-page mystery book. But it doesn't give too much away in certain points. It keeps you guessing all the way up until the end. And there's these breadcrumbs that these characters have, come to learn and come to realize throughout the book that have to be used together in the end to make the mystery be solvable. And I like that. I think it's great writing for what it is. It had me on my toes. It had me interested to see what they find out next. Even though the chapters were about 13 to 14 pages long, which is a mild negative, there's a lot of setting up this stuff to have payoff later on. And I really enjoyed that. So the mystery aspect was very well done and very well woven. And let's get to the big question. The Gravemother. Is the Gravemother great? I'll tell you this. The Gravemother has to be one of the scariest villains I've read in a kid's horror book since Killer Computer with Zippy. The Gravemother was a great concept of a villain. Yeah, if you want to say, oh, this is just a generic haunted house story, what are you talking about, completionist? No, the Gravemother is legitimately terrifying. She's described with jet black hair, soulless eyes, a missing jaw. You see, like, the descriptions of the story make her so creepy. And the abilities that she's able to do, she's able to, like, take people and take them back to, like, a different dimension in time. She's able to, like, float across the ground and, like, just randomly appear. She can whisper things, and it sends chills up the backs of people who hear it. She is creepy. And I know she's a ghost character, but this is a very well-written ghost archetype, and I enjoyed myself with this character. Now, I will say, at certain parts of the story, it does get kind of predictable when you think, as the story's building on with these mysteries, she's almost always somewhat involved, and it kind of starts to wear thin a little bit by the end, by the stuff she's doing. But I do like that Chupeko was able to do different things with her character, and it all kind of made sense with her being a ghost, and none of it seems like that far out of the realm of explanation because it's supernatural. So, yeah, everything with the Gravemother I thought was very well done and very creepy. And especially if you read the scene when they first move the monument off and Zane witnesses what he thinks he sees coming out of the ground, that was absolutely terrifying. And I'll stand by that. That was really creepy. So there you go. And I guess one last positive, when it comes to the story itself, I just felt so much emotion with this. You know, you get, like I said, I've already brought up the strengths of the characters. You start to feel this coming of age feeling story with them too. But you get this wholeness to it, you know. I want to say it's quite decom, you know, back in the day when they did Halloween movies or anything. But it feels like this story has a purpose. You know, it's not going for pulp fodder like Goosebumps is known for. It feels like somebody sat down and said, hey, I want to tell a scary story, but put some substance there. And the substance works. Like I said, there's some commentary that speaks through in the story. There's themes of, you know, desecration of graves and doing the ethical thing about that. There's themes about moving on from your past. There's themes about actually settling down, finding home, finding a sense of belonging, overcoming adversaries to become friends. I mean, there's a lot of stuff at play in this book. And at 250 pages, I think it definitely delivers on a lot of those things that make books great to begin with. And I'm very happy I decided to pick this up. Now, with that being said, I do have pretty much one main mild drawback with it, if I'm being honest. And I'll say this up front. It took me a few days to finish this book. And it's not because I was disinterested. It's because these chapters are about 13 to 14 pages long. So there's a lot of exposition in every chapter. There's breadcrumbs to be picked up in the mystery. There's characterization. These are depth-filled chapters. You got pretty much every literary element that makes a story chalked in these things. I will say it adds up. I did find myself around the 150 page mark saying, okay, when are we getting to the point? I felt like the biggest drawback is there's a little too much going on. I feel like in some parts of the book, there's a little too many, there's a bit too many breadcrumbs. I feel like it could have been simplified by the end, even with that, even though I think the ending does capitalize on almost all of them. You didn't need that much. I feel like there was a lot of convolution as well, dealing with like Garrett wanting to bring in his high school ghost squad to come check out the house. That just kind of felt like filler in the book because that stuff was pretty much done again later on with a professional team that does television. I don't know why that was in there, but that did segue into Zane getting to meet more of the local townsfolk and, you know, getting out of his shell. So I guess it does have a purpose. But like I said, all this stuff, it just takes a while to get to the point. And at 250 pages, you have to set aside maybe 8 to 10 pages for the beginning with the Midnight Society and about 8 to 10 pages at the end. So that leaves about 220 pages of actual story. I would say you can trim out about 30 pages of unneeded breadcrumbs, exposition, and kind of simplify it. And this book would have been fine at like maybe 180, 190 pages tops. With that being said, though, that's my only big negative with it. I think everything else structurally was a well-told, well-crafted story. I was honestly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And with that being said, from a 0 to 5 star basis, that mildly big negative did add up. And I decided, you know, I was kind of teetering on like a 4.4 and a 4.5, a B plus or an A minus. And I went ahead and decided on the A minus, and I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was an exceptional book. Really, if you're intimidated by the page count, That is one thing. And I will say this, going into this, you should know that this is a slow burn. I should also have mentioned that. It's a slow burn book. It takes a while to get going. But once it gets going and once you get to the good stuff, I think that does add up. And I do think that if you're the type of person looking for more emotional, whole feeling stories that you just don't really get in Goosebumps all that much, this will be a good shakeup. And especially because Are You Afraid of the Dark is pretty much the second biggest name in the kids' horror subgenre next to Goosebumps. And I definitely appreciate this book being what it is because it's boldly standing against what Goosebumps offers to the table. And you can love both equally. And I do think that this has me interested in wanting to try the next book in the series. And I hope more people go try this out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Tale of the Gravemother. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this book before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.